Du-du-dun, 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 du-du-dun.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Early Action. Again, I'm joined by Rishi and Shiv, my usual partner in crime.
All right.
My usual partner, Mossing, is in Mississippi experiencing a hurricane right now, so he has no power. So we're stuck with these guys
Yes,
again, much to everyone's
sir.
chagrin. Now we're going to start off week 8 like we usually do, starting from the top. And the first game on the agenda was the New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills. This game going into it was kind of a statement game for both teams. The Buffalo Bills started off really strong this season, but the last couple of games they've fallen off and lost, what was it, 2 or 3 consecutive games? We had Tennessee in there, Kansas City, and then maybe another one.
They had a narrow win against the Jets last week.
Yeah, that's what it was. They didn't cover and think they barely won that ball game. So the last 3 weeks for them were tough. And the Patriots did lose 3 straight games against Denver, the 49ers, and then this one here against the Buffalo Bills. What did you guys see in this game, and are the Patriots officially over?
Well, so kind of what I saw was that it was a typical New England Buffalo game in November. Both these teams relied heavy on the run game. You look at Harris, he had 16 rushes, 102 yards. Buffalo, they had two guys, 86, 81 yards, Singletary and Moss, but not a lot of receiving yards. So the Bills didn't play exceptionally well, but I think the Patriots are in for a problem here because they once again could not win at the end of the game. Cam Newton fumbled at the end. So I think it's time to close the door on the Patriots.
Okay, so Shiv's saying the season's over for the Patriots. Rishi, what do you say?
Well, let me say this much. I have no idea what Shiv said because his audio did not come through on my end, but that's okay because my opinion is my opinion here. So my thoughts are this. Patriots look terrible. You know what I mean? Look, Cam Newton, 174 yards passing, no tutties, 2 sacks. That's. I mean, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do? How are you going to win a game with that? You know what I mean? Damian Harris looked okay, 16 for 100, but again, in a losing effort, doesn't really matter. Obviously, the Patriots receiving core is pretty mediocre at best. Can't get any separation. You got Stephon Gilmore sitting out today. So, clearly something's going on there. It just doesn't really seem like there's any coordinated effort by the Patriots organization to, maximize the dubs that they're getting this season. And you know what? I'm cool with it. It's a nice change of pace. You know what I mean? If the Patriots are taking L's, I'm going to go ahead and say that probably 85% of NFL fans are cool with that, and I would be part of that 85%. So,
Yeah,
back to you.
Patriots, according to Jay Glazer from Fox, he said that I think Stephon Gilmore put his house up for sale, and that every order, like every kind of offer on the table, needs to be in by Monday, close of business, and the trade deadline is Tuesday. So if I had to guess, based off of that, I'm assuming Bill Belichick or somebody from that front office, maybe Robert Kraft, gave him a heads up, like, hey, Gilly, we're probably going to move you at the deadline, make arrangements now. And that's what he's doing. So looks like they're really selling shop, and they have no receivers. I think if they were a little bit more competitive in the division, currently they're third. I think the Dolphins and Bills are 2 teams that are ahead of them by a decent margin, especially with Tua and how they're looking now, as we'll address later. But I think since they're not very competitive in the playoffs or in their division, they aren't going to make that trade to get a Julio Jones, Allen Robinson, maybe a Michael Gallup. I think they're just going to kind of let this season play out, let Cam Newton walk, and maybe you rebuild altogether under Bill Belichick. I think the Patriots are done. As far as the Bills go,
But hold on, Rudy, hold on. I mean, let's like do a brief, 1 minute, 2 minute diagnosis here. Is Cam Newton really the
I don't
problem?
think Cam Newton's a problem, but I think they're going to let him walk because given the rest of the team, they're going to be like mediocre just because of how good Cam Newton is, but not bad enough to completely revamp that team. And I don't think Cam Newton's going to enjoy being in Foxborough. Cam Newton's not the guy to me that enjoys being in Boston, enjoys being cold and miserable 8 months out of the year. Okay, that doesn't really seem...
It was a business trip.
That doesn't seem to fit his vibe. So I think it's going to be on both ends here. I think the Patriots are going to be kind of trying to move on, but I think especially Cam Newton's going to be wanting to move on, especially because Bill Belichick has never been the type of guy to give his quarterback, namely Tom Brady, those elite weapons. He's always kind of been like, hey, we'll add pieces here, add pieces there, work with it. And with Tom Brady, that worked out okay. But with a guy like Cam Newton, maybe it doesn't. And I think with the lack of success this year, it's just going to be a parting on both sides. Now, the Bills do get a win here. They already had a strong command of the division. Did you guys see anything today that made you change your opinion on the Bills, or was it just like, hey, this is actually just a classic Bills game? I didn't really learn anything.
Well, I actually feel worse about the Bills, especially with how they played the last 2 weeks. I mean, if you look going back to their play against the Jets, they weren't able to get a single touchdown, and meanwhile, Kansas City's putting up 35 points on the Jets. And then you fast forward to this week, and they're not able to really do the same against the Patriots, who, again, no Stephon Gilmore. The Patriots are, their season's on the line, and Josh Allen has a 65.5 passer rating. He didn't play well at all in this game, so yeah. I'm actually a little concerned about the Bills.
I think the MVP buzz for Josh Allen is officially over now. Yeah,
it's done.
Yeah, Rishi, did you learn anything about the Bills today before we move on to the next game?
I mean, I'll be quite frank. I didn't really the game, but I will say this much, and it kind of it doesn't deviate much from what you guys are really saying. But to me, the Bills seem a bit discombobulated. They seem to be lacking identity. And I think that just kind of reinforces where they're at and how they're looking right now.
All right, we'll go on to the next game. This one was definitely a surprise, especially to me because I picked the Tennessee Titans to win in my Survivors League. But they go into Cincinnati and they lose 31-20 behind Joe Burrow and his 249 yards and a couple of TD passes. A lot of clutch plays by Burrow, a lot of good pocket maneuvering, especially when you consider he was down 4 offensive linemen and his starting running back, Joe Mixon, in this game. Tennessee was a team that we talked about in the Tiers podcast about being, up there in terms of contenders within the AFC. What did you see in this game? I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Rishi.
Yeah, I wanted to say something here. So, again, that's another game that I didn't really get the time to,
It's one of those games where it's on the background in red zone and they kind of skim through it, so it makes sense. But it's good enough for this, for sure.
Right, yeah, no, I definitely think it's worth talking about. I just, would like to preface by saying I didn't get the chance to watch it entirely or much of it at all, but I'm looking at the box score here, in that at halftime, up 17-7, and I don't know who started the second half with the ball, but the Titans dropped a goose egg in the third quarter. So did the Bengals, to be fair. But still, especially considering what we were talking about on our last episode, and especially talking about Mike Vrabel being a good coach and all those kinds of things, it's interesting to me that, you went into halftime down, so you would assume that some adjustments would be made. And I don't know if it was a lack of adjustments that were made or if it was just the improper adjustments that were made. But, clearly whatever was talked about, whatever the execution plan was, is not necessarily what took place. The fourth quarter was a little bit more even. It was 13-14 respectively in terms of scoring. But, still.
Are the Titans frauds, Rishi?
No, I don't think they're frauds. I think they might have got caught off guard. I know my buddy Shiv over there. He likes to he has a couple of different phrases he likes to use for situations like this. And to be honest, I can't recall them off top. But I know one specific word is like kind of a trap game. And I think that perhaps could have been what happened today. Not that the Titans undervalued or underestimated the Bengals, but perhaps they figured that, even if it was a close game, they could edge it out, just given their record versus theirs and their experience versus the Bengals as well.
Shiv, what were your takeaways from this game?
So I myself didn't get to watch too much of this game. I only got to see pretty much the end of it. I was too busy watching Tua and the Dolphins. But I think an interesting thing to note is that the Titans keep falling behind these games. They did this last week too. They fell behind. Again, it was to a Pittsburgh Steelers team that's good. But then they fall behind to the Bengals, and then they make a last-ditch effort to come back, but their defense isn't good enough to sustain that kind of comeback every single week. So I'm kind of concerned because, again, I didn't see what the Bengals did to the Titans' offense in the first half. But, Tennessee's got some things to work on. Rishi, you mentioned something about the Titans might have got caught looking ahead. I don't know if that's the case because they lost last week, and typically when a team is coming off a loss, they would really be hyper focused on getting this next dub. That being said, I don't know who they're playing next week. If they're playing Indianapolis, maybe they did get caught looking ahead. But this is something where I'm going to have to go back and look and see what the Bengals did to the Titans and what the Titans were making mistakes on.
Yeah,
I like that catch, Shiv.
look,
I will admit to that.
we're talking about the Bengals and the Titans in this game, right? And the Titans are a team that the record has been good. I don't think anyone truly believed that they were, in the conversation with the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Steelers, really, because we always thought there's something missing there. And on the other side, when you look at the Bengals, they're a team that has been in so many close games throughout this season. They're always just a one play away here, one play away there.
Yeah,
and that's what I thought this game was going to be. I thought Joe Burrow would make things interesting, but then just because the Titans have so much more talent on other sides of the field and just personnel and more experience, that they would pull out and get a win. Because so many times over the course of this season, we've seen the Bengals give up big leads. They gave up a 24-point lead to the Colts, and we've seen the Titans storm back from a big deficit. So I think we're all kind of expecting that to happen as well. The Titans made that push, but every time they did, the Bengals, led by Joe Burrow, went on these ridiculous drives, these long, sustained drives, ending with touchdowns, not field goals, which is how you stave off a comeback.
So Rudy, I want to probe, like, you out of the three of us who probably watched most of that game. What did you see on the offensive side of the ball? What could you deduce as far as strategy employed by the Bengals? Was it a run-heavy attack, pass-heavy attack, play action? What were they looking at?
So the interesting thing with the Bengals is their head coach is Zach Taylor, the former quarterback coach of the Rams back when they went on their Super Bowl run. So what he implements a lot is a spread offense, very similar to college, very similar to what he ran under Joe Brady at LSU in his senior season. So you're talking about Joe Burrow in shotgun, not under center, but in the shotgun with maybe a running back, but usually five spread out receivers and running backs. He is so comfortable.
So what kind of situation is that usually putting the defense in? Is that going to be?
So what happens there is the defense usually has to be super spread out. They know most likely it's a pass play, but no matter what, they have to be prepared for a pass play. So that does two things. Number one, like the inside zone play people do in Madden all the time? That becomes more wide open because now you have usually 4 down linemen, and the linebackers have to be playing a little bit more off from the line of scrimmage. So you get a little more cheaper yards like that, which is helpful when you don't have a good offensive line like the Bengals. When you have to block less people and you have less people that congested, it's a little bit easier to make those run plays. The other thing it does is that Joe Burrow he only has to look at maybe one half of the field. This is something that teams usually do in high school and middle school when they don't really trust their quarterback, but the Bengals have to do it because they don't really trust their offensive line. So now Joe Burrow only has to look at the left or the right when he's determining reads and things like that, because 2 cornerbacks are usually on 3 wide receivers. So whenever you do that, he can kind of determine the routes and the structures and how it's going to look and who's going to be open. And that way he can make those reads super fast and get the ball out super fast. So that's kind of what the Bengals do. That's what they've been doing all year. It just worked out that this particular week, and maybe that's because Joe Burrow has more experience, that it clicked on all cylinders, and the defense was able to play just good enough to get this win. So I think we don't know what we've learned is kind of what I'm getting from this. Is from the Titans. It's like we know they're still good. I think this is just one of those games because you have 16 games in the season. You're going to lose some of these games.
Right, and the Bengals
I think that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chip. Go ahead.
Okay, I think you're spot on about the Titans. This is probably just a down game for them, but also with the Bengals, I think we kind of know what they are now. They're not going to be necessarily a good team, but they're always going to be in games. I think they are now 5-1-2 against the spread throughout the season. So this is going to be a team that's going to be a pest for a lot of these other teams that they're going up against, and they're always going to be in games because they have Joe Burrow.
And I'll let you close on this matchup.
I just wanted to. Yeah, no, I just want to say I think the most interesting thing to take away from this matchup is how other teams. I mean, I think we can all agree that the Titans, despite what happened today, are good enough to be, in the conversation towards the end of the season. I'm sure they will be a team challenging the playoffs, if not in the playoffs, the type of scenario. So, again, I think the most interesting thing to take away from this is how other teams in the league might study this game and try to kind of implement some of the things that the Bengals did well and things of that nature to kind of curb the Titans' ability to either come back or make an early run, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera.
No, that's a good point.
I just think in general,
Yeah.
the takeaways from this game will
I
be
think the
interesting.
ramifications of this game is going to be more so in the years to come when the Bengals can actually put a good roster on Joe Burrow. I think their style of offense is going to be the future of the NFL. But I want to move on to the.
I mean, I'll be honest, Joe Burrow, I mean, apart from the offensive line, he's got some weapons, right? Like you got T. Higgins.
He has
you got,
Boyd.
you know,
He has
I mean,
Boyd,
there's guys who are going
but then
unused
AJ Green's
too.
He's got
washed.
good
He
weapons.
doesn't really have tight ends.
Even John Ross.
Bro, John Ross
Ross
doesn't
is
even play.
John Ross is
for
not
trade.
playing.
He
He's
doesn't
not playing.
play, bro.
I know he's
He's
not.
a
I know
good
he's not
name.
playing,
He's a
but I'm
name.
just saying. I mean,
He is a name, and
he's a look. I'm just saying. You got a guy like T. Higgins. He's a decently large body. You got a guy like Tyler Boyd, another athletic dude. But then you got a guy like John Ross who stretches the field, very similar to Oakland, right? Like
John
Henry
Ross
Ruggs
play,
is not necessarily.
while he doesn't play, that's because there's other guys who can. So there's people who are more.
Yeah, sure.
So it just means, to your point, that they do have weapons, because if they don't play a guy like John Ross, that means
they do need a better offensive line. Though. You
That's the
can't
key.
really do anything with the offensive line they have, which I agree with.
All right, I want to move on to the Vegas Raiders at the Cleveland Browns. Vegas wins this one 16-6. Reece, I'm gonna let you take lead on this ball game.
Yeah, I mean, buttoned up. Nothing much to see here. I don't think it's a game that the Raiders should have even had a chance to lose. If they're legit, this game was a lock from the beginning, and they did go in. They took care of business. You'd like to see a bit more, a bit more excitement in terms of execution on the offensive side of the ball. I know Derek Carr missed some deep balls to Henry Ruggs, which that connection has got to be there for their offense to really evolve from the point that it was at last season. But overall, it was tough conditions. They went in there, they got the dub, and Raiders are now 4-3, sitting number 2 in the division. So can't complain.
Shiv, I want to lead you with this. Last week, Baker Mayfield, he's a stud.
And Eric Harris did not get extremely exposed today. And I just want to say, he's still terrible. He is still awful.
All right.
But he didn't get exposed.
That was the weekly Eric Harris rant by Rishi Patel. He's going to link his SoundCloud to the
I hate Eric Harris.
description of this YouTube.
Yeah, we know.
He has a diss track coming up against him. Shiv, I want to lead you with this. Last week, Baker Mayfield goes off. He has 5 touchdown passes. This week, he is a dud. He has 120 passing yards, something. I think Derek Carr might have had less, to be honest. But, it hurts a little bit more when you only put up 6 points. So what's Baker's issue? Is it missing OBJ, just the idea of having him on the field? Defense doesn't know how to prepare for that. Is it the offensive scheme led by Steven Stefanski, who, he's coming from Minnesota, a run-heavy team? Or is it just Baker's issue himself? Like, what's going on here? Why can't he be consistent throughout any 2 to 3 week span?
Well, I think it's solely on Baker. I don't think it's OBJ. I don't think it's the scheme that Stefanski's running. Honestly, I think the scheme that Stefanski's running is kind of helping keep Baker under wraps a little bit and keeps him from being exposed. But he had a great game last week against the Bengals. But if you go back and look at it, the Bengals didn't force him to go off his first read much at all. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was after his first 5 pass attempts, which are all incompletions, he completed all 23 from there, and I believe it was 21 of 23 were on the first read. So that's something where if a quarterback just has to line up, take the ball, and see one guy and throw it to him, a lot of quarterbacks, pretty much every quarterback who's starting in the NFL can do that. The issue is when you have to go from your first to second read, and you can't do that, you're not going to make it in this league. And that's something that Baker has struggled with ever since he came out of college. I will say one thing about this game. This is one of my favorite picks for Hammer the Line. The under at 50.5 was key in this because there was a bunch of weather factors in this.
They had
I believe the wind was.
I think is that what they
wind was around 30 miles per hour. It was supposed to rain a lot. I don't know if it did. But whenever you have a win game with 2 quarterbacks who are not known for their arm strength, they're not Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen.
I will make.
You're
this
gonna
comment.
have.
Go ahead.
You're gonna have.
No, sorry.
Yeah. Let me just finish. You're gonna have games where the quarterbacks are gonna struggle to throw the ball downfield. So Rishi, you alluded to Derek Carr not being able to connect with Ruggs downfield. I think that was more of the situation rather than Derek Carr struggling necessarily. I think it's more weather.
Yeah, I agree with you there. If you watched any of the special teams, especially like the point after attempts and the field goals. It was obviously quite a shit show. But anyway, the other thing I was going to say is that I think it's interesting because these two teams, I see a lot of similarities in them. Strong offensive lines when everyone's healthy, quarterbacks that still have a lot of questions around them, receiving cores that have talent but still for some reason remain unproven, really solid ground games, defenses that you can't rely too much on. So I think it was an interesting matchup. But as far as why the Raiders came away with the victory and why, Baker played the way he did, why the Browns as a whole played the way they did, you could chuck it up to the weather, you could chuck it up to whatever, but I just think, perhaps the Raiders were the better team in this matchup, despite, how the records look coming in.
Yeah, I think both teams are very similar pretty much on every phase of the game. Baker and Derek Carr are very, very similar. The only thing is Derek Carr wasn't a number one overall pick, so maybe he doesn't get the opportunities, or maybe doesn't get the kind of like that window that you do as a starting quarterback to provide results. Derek Carr had that one good year, his second year, I think. He was kind of an MVP candidate. He's kind of been riding that, and I think the general consensus is that if the Raiders don't make the playoffs this year, they don't make enough noise that they will end up replacing him. And I think Baker's in a similar position as well. If not this year, it'll be next year for him. So I think these are two very similar teams, and the Raiders were just the team who's better on this given day. But at the I don't see much of a difference between these two teams. And now I want to move on. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say, as far as that, just last comment on that game, there were a couple of very crucial, rulings by the officials as far as the Jarvis Landry touchdown catch and then the Hunter Renfrow touchdown catch. So that definitely played a factor. I mean, you're looking at a game that was a margin of victory of 10 points, I think.
Yeah, 16.
But you get a touchdown that ends up counting way earlier in the game, and that margin of victory.
Yeah, and the game
less.
Seems closer, and you just kind of
powerful.
assume Baker played a little bit better instead of assuming he does.
Yeah,
so that's
different scenario.
I'll move on to a game that I don't want to spend too much time on, but it was the Indianapolis Colts against the Detroit Lions. Indianapolis wins. They actually put up 41. They win 41-21 in Detroit. My only takeaway here is that the Colts still aren't very good. The Lions' defense is just extremely bad. I think Phillip Rivers threw maybe 10 yards of air yards the whole game. He was a little swing here.
What kind of coach is Matt Patricia? Is he a defensive guy?
He's a defensive
guy.
He's
defensive.
He's a defensive guy,
right?
Defensive.
He's known for being an engineer, actually. That was his big calling card.
And this is what I don't understand. I feel like in his tenure, the Detroit Lions have been correct me if I'm wrong, right. I may be wrong, but I feel like they've been one of the worst defenses year over year.
They've been horrible. They run too much man for my taste.
What is it? Is it really?
Yeah, so the Lions,
what they thing? They don't have the personnel to run the scheme he wants.
No,
I
don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case.
That's it. There's really nothing else to say. He's not very good. He has Matt Stafford who's going to keep putting up numbers, keeping up in games because they have got Galladay and they got Marvin Jones. They got guys who can play.
I'll say this much: I feel for Lions fans because I think in the NFL there's this really, really dark, decrepit place that you don't want to be as an NFL fan, and that is when your team is just fully locked in a cycle of mediocrity, and no matter what happens, there's no escape. You can have a first-round pick, you can have a top 5 pick, you can get a good guy, and you're still going to be in the same place every season. 8-8 is good and bad. It just I hate to see it, but
I think all this game did was add another win to the Colts record to make them look like they're a decent football team, and then it pushed the Lions down a little bit. But I didn't learn really anything from any of these teams today. I think the Colts still are not very good, and they're going to beat up on teams that are bad. But I think they're going to have a lot of trouble beating teams that are mediocre to better than mediocre, and that's really the only thing I have. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Well, I actually tend to agree, and this is why I agree with you, is that this game was one of those games where the Colts, everything was going right for them. Kenny Galladay gets hurt pretty early on, so now the Lions' best receiver is gone for the game. That hamstrings their offense. The Colts also got back Darius Leonard in this game, and when he is with them, they are able to put a stranglehold on offenses that are not that great. I think they give up 14 points per game when they have Darius Leonard. Also, you have Phillip Rivers playing in the dome. Now, it doesn't matter that it's the Lions Stadium because there's no real home field advantage, but the fact that it's a dome means there's no inclement weather. And so I think this is one of the cases where everything was going right for the Colts and they got the dub. That's about it.
Yeah, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this game because it just wasn't very interesting. A game that was, for kind of surprising reasons, was Minnesota at Green Bay. Minnesota had a 2-touchdown lead at the.
No. Let me correct you. Let me correct you. It was Minnesota. Excuse me. It was Green Bay against basically Dalvin.
It was a Dalvin Cook
that's
show.
really
I think
what
he
we're
was
talking about,
up there and maybe the most fantasy points by running back ever in a single ball game. I'm not sure if he eventually did get it or not, but I know he was getting up there in the 40s, maybe flirting with the 50s. But like I said,
it was over 200 total yards, 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, I think no matter what the
226.
scoring is in your league,
yeah, it kind of depends.
yeah,
but regardless,
you should
regardless,
be
you
in
won.
40-plus territory.
Yeah, especially if you had Devontae Adams on the other side, you definitely won. The Vikings do end up winning 28-22. It was closer on the scoreboard than it was on the football field. Minnesota ran all over the Packers. The Packers started off really strong, 2 touchdown drives with Rodgers and Adams connecting, and it looked like they were going to roll to an easy victory. You know, yeah, you don't trust Kirk, but in this case, you didn't even need to. They just handed the ball off to Dalvin Cook, and like Shiv said, he goes for over 200 yards from scrimmage. You add in about like 6 to 7 receptions in there, and this is a game where I know going into this week, everyone was big on the Packers. Like, hey, they had a mess up against the Buccaneers. They looked bad, but they had a big statement win against the Texans. You know, they're still a contender. They're there. But they fall short to their division foes here with Minnesota. What did you kind of take away from the end of this game? Do you think these running woes are really going to plague them in a league that is more so passing than rushing is, especially these top teams in the NFC? Do you think this is going to be something that sticks with the Packers, or do you see this more as a win by the Vikings and maybe they can claw their way into postseason relevance? Shiv, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I think there's a larger issue at hand for the Green Bay Packers is that they really have a weakness when it comes against strong running teams. We see this going back to last year. Both times that they played the Niners completely decimated them on the ground. The Packers weren't able to stop anything. I believe that was the case with the Chargers as well last year. This year, when they played the Bucks, they weren't able to stop the run. And then again with Minnesota, Dalvin Cook ran all over them. And so I think your point is interesting that will it hurt them in the postseason when they're going up against
when it actually matters.
Passing?
Yeah.
So I think it could hurt them in the sense if you can't stop the run at all and teams can just continue to do that, you're going to set yourself behind the 8 ball. So I actually think it could be a massive problem for them if they go up. Let's say San Francisco sneaks into the playoffs. I know they struggled today, but they're going to be on the edge to get that wild card spot. If you go up against San Francisco and maybe they're getting healthy at the right time, that's going to be a problem if Kyle Shanahan's going to be able to run the ball all over you like Minnesota was able to do, and the Packers could get upset. So that's one thing where I think they have an Achilles heel on that on that defensive side of the ball for the Packers, and it could plague them in the postseason, but it'll really depend on the matchup. What do you think, Rishi?
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple of comments, and I think the first one is that no Aaron Jones in this matchup, I think, makes a huge difference. Obviously, you saw the impact that Dalvin Cook had. They do rely on him a lot, and they had a pretty solid replacement squad because I can't really say it was one person, but between Jamal Williams and
AJ Dillon,
I believe his name is Aaron Dillon. AJ Dillon. Yeah, between those two, they were able to put together a respectable performance in Aaron Jones' stead. But I do think having Aaron Jones here does make a difference. In addition, I just think commenting on the Packers as a whole, I think this will be a consistent thing throughout the entire season. They're just a streaky team, and if you catch them on a day where they're hot and they come out firing, they're going to be really tough to beat. But if you kind of get them on their heels, then they could look a little bit suspect. And I will make another comment on the play calling on the offensive side of the ball. Shiv, help me out here. Is it Matt LaFleur who's calling the plays? Who's the OC?
Matt LaFleur is calling the plays. He's the head coach and calling the plays.
I don't know. I know that the game started out. I think it maybe even went to halftime, tied at 14 apiece. Mm-hmm. And then I believe it was the second half where things kind of started to fall apart for the Packers. And I think they they just need to be a little bit more dynamic with their play calls. It was kind of prescriptive, like even though it wasn't necessarily a direct handoff on your first and second down, it was still a run play. And you can, as a defense, you can game that. You can take away outside, you can stack the box, you can do different things. And I just think when you have a receiver like Devontae who can create separation with ease the way that he can, I mean, you got to take advantage of that.
Right.
If you can start a drive with a couple of yards, chunk yards, and put yourself in a second and manageable, third and manageable, I mean, that's huge.
And it's also,
I just think that they need to take advantage of that a little bit more.
right. It's a little perplexing that they weren't able to get Devontae open a lot in this game. I know he had a good stat line and a good game, but against the Texans, he was just going off. And the Vikings in this game, it's not like they have a strong secondary. In addition to that, a lot of their corners or secondary players got hurt. So I wonder why they weren't able to get Devontae. I'm also curious, were they possibly looking ahead to San Francisco? Because they play them on Thursday night. And the 49ers, they're not the same team from last year. But, the Packers, they have to be wanting to win this game coming up on Thursday.
I know people talk about, like, looking ahead and trap games and all that stuff. I think that's just something that fans and the media say. Like, these are NFL players. These are professional athletes. These are coaches. They're not looking ahead to the next week and planning on the 49ers, There's just you just lose.
Well, yeah, they're not planning.
They may not be,
they're not planning.
In their head saying, that their next real matchup.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's the NFL. You lose. You're gonna lose games.
Rudy,
it has nothing to do with looking ahead.
I do think there is something to be said though about perhaps preparation being a little bit less buttoned up, just because you feel like straight up from a talent level, you're team, so there's no reason that you're not going to beat this team, and especially in a team sport like football, right? I mean, look, Aaron Rodgers is supported by one of the best receivers in the league, and those two are also supported by one of the better running backs in the league who didn't happen to play in this game, but still, like, that kind of mindset where it's like, I'm good, but so are my teammates. It's kind of that diffusion of responsibility, and I think sometimes that can, not directly. It's not as if everybody's like, like if I have a bad game, Aaron's going to make sure that we still win.
But, it seems like a cop-out. I think teams just don't have good games and they lose. That's just kind of the nature of football. It happens.
That's fair.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I will say I don't think they weren't prepping for San Fran. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just thinking
I know. Like just you come off
I
know, but I think that
happens. Right. You come off an easy win against Houston, and now you're playing Minnesota, who's really struggling.
But I feel like that will happen with teams who are poorly coached or poorly managed, but not a team like the Packers.
Okay, yeah.
I'll be very honest. I think there was a very crucial tipping point in the game where the Packers had, I think it was back-to-back drives where they basically went 3 and out. And there's another thing that really plagued them in this game, and it was penalties. It was a lot of false starts, and holding calls and things of that nature by their offensive line that set them. I mean, yeah, I know at one point I was commenting to Shiv, the Packers were in a 2nd and 30 situation. And things like that. It wasn't a very clean game.
Fair enough.
And so to that point, Shiv, I could see where a little bit of maybe the preparation wasn't as clean, it wasn't as tight as you would like it to be for an opponent that perhaps they may have had a little bit more regard for.
All right, now I want to blow by this next game. That was the Jets visiting Kansas City. Kansas City wins 35-9. They just disrespected the Jets from the jump. Tyreek Hill with 2 bomb touchdowns. McCole Hardman with a wide receiver reverse for a touchdown. And they even did a fake punt for no reason at all. The Jets were never going to be in this ball game. Did you guys, learn anything? Maybe you're more firm in your decision that the Chiefs are contenders / the Jets are getting Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Sam Darnold did have some bright moments, but I don't think it's good enough to. I
think I have a pretty important comment. I just want to say to all the other Tyreek Hill fantasy football owners out there, Byron Pringle and Mecole Hardman are the biggest wannabes that exist in the league, and you know what I'm saying. I think Andy Reid is a bit infatuated by these weapons, but there's no reason that Tyreek Hill shouldn't have 4 touchdowns.
And that's your weekly Rishi bargaining on the behalf of his fantasy football team. Shiv, back to you for any thoughts on the actual game that was played on the actual field there in Kansas City.
Well, I have no thoughts because I did not watch this game at all. It played out exactly how I thought it would, and that's about it. Let's just skip this game and move on, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to learn anything in a game featuring the best team in the NFL versus the worst. Moving on to the next game, this was another home dog who gets the win, and that's the Los Angeles Rams at the Miami Dolphins. Tua and his boys win 28-17. From the jump there, it looked like Tua, we're like, okay, we're excited, but we're a little bit nervous still. He's still facing Aaron Donald. Jalen Ramsey was supposed to play. So, you have that going against him, and then you also have Sean McVay leading that offense against his defense. Those two components mix in his offensive line and their troubles, and I don't think anyone expected this outcome, especially because the Dolphins made it look easy. Rishi, what are you saying right now with your pantomiming?
Yes, my pantomiming is saying this. Jared Goff attempted 61 passes. 61 passes against the Miami
And they didn't
Dolphins.
win.
They fell behind early.
That's I mean, I just don't.
I mean, they had the lead.
You got that kind of defense.
Well, okay, so here's the thing.
I mean, we talked about this, right? So let's in the context of what we discussed last episode, right? Who has more of the responsibility for this game? Is it the offense or the defense, right? Is it on Jared Goff to go ahead and just blow out the Dolphins by exposing their pretty mediocre or less than mediocre defense, or is the onus on the Rams defense, who is more or less packed with studs? Should they just go ahead and just shut out this rookie quarterback making his first start? So through the lens of that, where do we put the burden of this loss in terms of the Los Angeles Rams?
The burden goes on the Rams offense. They're to blame for this game. And it's pretty simple. So the game started off 0-0, and it started off with the Dolphins with the ball. Aaron Donald gets a strip sack, I believe, on the second play of the game. Rams score a touchdown, and they jump out to that early lead that, Rudy, you alluded to. The problem was, from there on out, Jared Goff had 4 picks, I believe, in that first half. Not 4 picks.
Small.
2 picks, 2 fumbles. And one of those fumbles was returned for a touchdown.
A little baby hand.
Immediately after, they also had a kickoff return or a punt return for a touchdown. So I think this is a game where the offense really set the defense up in bad positions or just outright gave the other team points. And the Rams fell behind 28-7. They got off to that slow start. And to be honest, I didn't watch the second half of this game because I knew the way it was going. So Jared Goff's stats looked fine at the end, 355 yards. That all looks fine, but I think it's the offense inability to set the tone at the beginning of the game was the reason why the Rams lost.
Look, you got to give the Dolphins their flowers. They have played a couple games this season that they've looked very good. They beat the 49ers. They blew them out. They had a lead against the Rams pretty much the whole entire game. And I think we're so used to defending losses against the Dolphins because they haven't been good historically in the past, 5 years or whatever it has been, just because they've been dominated in the AFC East with the Patriots for so long. But they look like a pretty solid football team. This is what happens when you rebuild for 3 years and you have a coach like Brian Flores, who's a well-respected guy. I think we might be seeing the kind of the next face of the AFC with the Dolphins here. I think the Dolphins, they're in the AFC East, and the Chargers in the AFC West. I think in a couple of years, they're going to be the face as the Steelers decline with Big Ben, as other kind of formidable giants that we've known, like the Colts in the years past even, are declining and fading away. I think these are the teams that are going to rise up. You need a good quarterback, and when you have a good quarterback and a good coach, you're going to have success. I think the Dolphins have their coach with Brian Flores. It's too early with Tua, but if anything that we knew going into the draft bodes, in his favor.
But hold on, let's diagnose the Miami Dolphins. Where does the talent lie outside of head coach and QB?
They got Byron Jones, a top-tier cornerback. They have Myles Gaskin, who's a formidable running back. They have Preston Williams in the wide receiver position, Devontae Parker. Both those guys can play. Obviously, you would want another receiver there, like a true number one that you can rely on game in, game out. But the fact that they don't have that, and they're still 4-3 now with quality wins against the Rams and the 49ers, means that there is something there, and they're only going to get better. So I think we need to give the Dolphins some credit. You know, they're going to be fighting for.
But let's be real. Hold on. Let's be real. Let's be real about that 49ers game. That was, I mean, the most out of left field result that anybody could have expected. Jimmy Garoppolo looked terrible. He might as well have gone out and played, you know.
Well, he didn't just play.
He might
He
as
didn't
well
play
have
terrible
not
against
played
air.
in
He was
that
playing
game.
against the Dolphins. You got to give the Dolphins at least something. You can't just be like, oh yeah, Garoppolo just played bad.
I do give him credit. But I guess just to your point,
I'm not saying they're
we're seeing the future
I'm
of the
saying
AFC
it's the origin
and the
story.
Dolphins.
Okay.
I think that's
This is Batman
bit
Begins. I'm not saying it's the
preemptive,
Dark Knight. I'm not saying it's like the like the real where the juice and the magic happens. I'm just saying this is the origin story.
Yeah, you better not be saying it's the Dark Knight.
I'm not saying it's the Dark Knight. I'm saying it's the
time.
This is
And
this is the
Miami
opening
Dolphins
sequence of Batman Begins. That's all I'm saying. All right, I want to move on to our next game. We had the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. Another opening kind of that 1:00 window where all these games kind of get mashed together. But this one kind of stood out amongst the rest because it was played on the national broadcasts in most of the markets. The Ravens and Steelers, it's going to be a close ball game in the AFC North matchup. Pittsburgh ends up stealing this one away, 28-24. The Ravens did have a chance, the last play of the game to maybe win the ball game. They didn't. Ben Roethlisberger scores a win here. I picked the Ravens. I thought the Ravens are a better team. I still think they are, especially when they get Des Bryant in there. And if he's anything that we know him to be, I think the Ravens are going to pull away from the Steelers the rest of the season. I still don't believe in the Steelers, but I really can't point to any objective facts or truths that defends my point of view. Shiv, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
Well, Rudy, I got to disagree with you now. I got to jump ship to the Steelers. I think they're going to win this division. I think they're actually going to get either the number 1 or the number 2 seed.
You think they're going to jump the Chiefs?
No. Number 1 or number 2.
Okay,
they're going to be lockstep with the Chiefs.
So you think they have a chance to jump the Chiefs?
Absolutely. They're 7-0 right now. Their schedule is easy coming up. The only tough games are the Ravens again and the Buffalo Bills. Wait, who they play? They play the Cowboys next. They play a couple easy teams, and they play the Ravens.
Rudy, I just had to make one comment. Your arm looks hella small right now, and I would recommend taking it off of the counter that you have it on. Just
it's on my leg. I'm gonna take it off though.
All right. Anyway, just my comment on the Steelers is I really think they're the better team right now. Baltimore has a good defense, but Lamar Jackson is not playing well.
Let's pretend that Willie Snead catches that ball in the end zone on the last play of the game, and the Ravens win. Are you still saying this? Yes or no?
Yes.
You're still saying that?
Yes, I still think so.
That's bullshit.
Yes, because look, the Steelers defense did something to Lamar this week that I'm starting to see more often. Is that they're baiting Lamar into certain kinds of run plays that they can come up and stop him.
He has no receivers.
Okay, but he gets Des Bryant. How much are you going to count on Des Bryant to revolutionize this offense?
Hold on. I mean, does he really have no?
Who does he have?
He does have weapons.
Mark Andrews was a stud last year.
He's still a stud, but he's a tight end.
Hollywood Brown stretches the field.
That doesn't mean anything. John Brown stretches the field. You know what the Bills had to do?
But then you also have a dynamic trio
of what? You don't say running back.
I don't know as much about.
I know you're not saying running back.
As much about Gus Edwards, but
I know you're not saying running back.
Yeah, pass catching running backs. Today they didn't have Mark Ingram, but J.K. Dobbins is that guy.
He's not that guy. He hasn't proved that guy all season. That's why you dropped him on your fantasy team.
But if
you believe what you're saying, you would not have dropped from your fantasy team.
No, what I don't believe in this is my whole thing. This goes back to the whole thing with the Ravens. I don't think it's a personnel problem. I don't think Lamar is a bad quarterback. Has he proven that he's an elite quarterback? Absolutely not. There's a lot of things that he's not doing that he needs to be doing if he wants to kind of make a progression and make a leap out of the category.
The weapons that just Ryan Tannehill has, he's going to produce for you.
I mean, yeah, you can't disagree there, but my point also being, Lamar has also got a much better defense to rely on. He is also a much more capable player than Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is great, but he's no Lamar. And I think that all of that feeds back into what is the coach doing, what is the scheme, what is the strategy behind the play calling, and I don't know. I just think as far as approach goes, there needs to be a little bit more variation. I think perhaps the Ravens have become too prescriptive, and what's happening is the game plan is foiled very early in the game, and then it just becomes, well, Lamar, we need you to just pass the ball and get chunk yardage, get touchdowns, and that's kind of an unfair position to be put in. I just think there's not necessarily enough being done to help Lamar out, perhaps in terms of approach and strategy and things
I'll
like
say
that.
this. I think these are two teams that are still good, and I don't know if there's any real difference between the two of them. I think on any given day, either team can win. It's similar to the conversation we had about the Browns and the Raiders. Very similar teams. I think the difference is that the Steelers have a significantly better defense, and the Ravens have a significantly better quarterback. That's about it. I think in terms of how it kind of produces on the field, they're more or less going to be the same. I think every game they play will be close, and I think division is also going to be just as close. I want to move on to a game that turned into a bit of a classic there at the end, even though it did not seem like it was going to be that way all throughout the first 3.5 quarters. And that's between the Los Angeles Chargers at the Denver Broncos there in Mile High. Denver wins this one 31-30.
The Broncos are
at
trash.
The buzzer.
Drew Lock is
now, I don't
garbage.
think this game
The Broncos
I don't think this game
trash.
needs any real analysis, but let's react to just the end of that game. How the hell did Drew Lock and his white man dance moves march down the field and get that? That was a pretty nice throw. A little bit behind.
It was really nice.
Behind the defender, enough room to get his butt down before the boundary. That was good. Rishi, on pause, or you are miming? He's saying Drew Lock is trash. Shiv, what are your thoughts on that?
Well,
end,
he's kind of
on that end. We don't really care about the team. Neither team is going to have any relevance to the rest of the season.
Well, the end of it was amazing. I thought Drew Lock might have just saved his job on that end because he was
first year. Get out of here.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? No. He's on the hot seat for sure.
For what?
You got to at least produce something. Well, he's okay. Like you said, he's been awful the past few games. You need to see some sort of steps of improvement. If he continues awful play, he's going to lose his job if the Broncos have a great draft.
And he was playing pretty
and
awful.
He was, yeah.
His number one receiver is out for the whole year. What do you want to do?
Right. Okay, we're not saying he has to dominate.
Who's their number one receiver?
That was his number one receiver. Yeah.
Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton is really leaps and bounds ahead of Jerry Jeudy.
Yes, he's better.
And Tim Patrick.
Yes.
No. Oh, my God. Come on, guys.
Okay,
well, first, the whole team is garbage. And we're making excuses for them playing like garbage because their number one garbage player is out. They're trash.
So my only thing with this is that I just wanted to see if Drew Lock could keep this game close because they're outmatched when it comes to the Chargers. Well, he was really bad in the first 2.5 quarters, and the only touchdown they got was from Philip Lindsay breaking a run, like a 60-yard run. However, he was really good in that fourth quarter and the end of the third quarter, and that last drive. I mean, it was great football play. That's really all I can say. Is that it was just a great drive and he won.
On a day where we had a pretty, a few good games in the early window, the late window wasn't very good. Even though we did have an overtime game that we're about to get to, nothing was really too exciting. So even though these two teams aren't going to provide any real results for us this season, it was fun to watch a competitive game that ends in a fun fashion like that. And at this point of the year, I'll take it, even though it's between the Chargers and the Broncos. So the Broncos do get that one from the Chargers. Again, neither team's going to be making too much noise this season. The next game.
Two shit teams playing like shit don't mean shit.
The next game is the Niners at the Seahawks. The score here is Seattle wins 37-27 up there in Washington. Really, my only takeaway here is that we all thought the 49ers were back to maybe their level, their status last season. This game kind of showed it wasn't. They only lost by 10, but this game wasn't nearly that close. Seattle proved that they are, the dominant force, and maybe it kind of shows that the Cardinals are better than we thought they were, because the Cardinals, were with the Seahawks every step of the way last Sunday night and eventually did win. The 49ers are never really in that position. Any key takeaways here from this game? Risha, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I want to say it takes two to tango, and I think that the Cardinals are that dance partner for the Seattle Seahawks. They match up with them well. They match in terms of style.
It kind of reminds me of the Ravens and the Steelers. They match up well, two to tango kind of deal. Well, that's more defensive oriented.
Yeah. Yep. In a very different way. But in
the end result is a competitive, fun, close game. Keep going, yeah.
Exactly. And in the 49ers defense, their strength has always been the running game. Jimmy Garoppolo is nothing more than a figurehead. And basically in this game he had to be more than that because, they were relying on, I think their running back core was like Jerick McKinnon, Tevin Coleman, and JaMychal Hasty. When, they're used to having a bit higher level of talent at that running back position, and that usually carries a bit more of the burden, and more evenly distributes it between the passing game and the running game. So, there is a takeaway here that the 49ers aren't quite there yet, but at the same time, they went through a um, heavy series of injuries at the beginning of the season. A couple of those players will be back in due time. So, obviously not a great look the way that the game went, because even though it was only a 10-point margin of victory, it was much. It wasn't that close to the game the whole time, but still, I think the 49ers were nowhere near full strength.
That's fair.
They
And
weren't
Jimmy
really
G
able to
gets
play their
benched. I
style of
think
football.
that's something to look towards.
No, he got injured. He got
He
injured.
got benched.
Maybe, yeah. He was playing
Honestly,
that
they're the
badly.
same thing. They're the same thing in this scenario. I
Yeah,
mean,
he got benched.
he's
Sure.
been playing. I don't really know. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but he has not had one good
No.
game this
And
season.
No, he has not.
And Mullins,
Perhaps he did in the
outplayed
first
him
two
today.
games.
Mullins
Okay,
outplayed him
yeah,
today.
I don't.
That's something I think I'm going to monitor this season.
And Mullins played like
Not very good the other time. Yeah.
S
Mhm.
word.
Yeah. All right. So
Well,
I don't really know if we can
have
cuss
any
on this
closing thoughts
podcast.
on that game. I think it's just Seattle proving that they are
What
who
are the
they are,
guidelines?
and the 49ers proving that while they have remnants of the prowess they had last season, they aren't going to be able to make that leap to be a true division threat to whatever Seattle and the Cardinals have up there brewing. But they can fight for a wild card.
See, the funny thing about the Niners is like, I mean, you look at their receiving core, they're without Debo, but they still got guys like Ayuk. Obviously, they got
I don't
Kittle.
believe in that though. I don't think Ayuk's that great of a receiver. Like
he's also a rookie.
He plays like Debo. Like he'll run the ball very well. You give him the ball in space, he can make something happen. But in terms of like, he's not a good route runner. He's not going to give you any space. He's not going to do any of those things. But then
That's
again,
a fair point.
the Niners don't need somebody
but
like
again,
that, given how their offensive plays. So that's fair.
Right. If they can get their running backs to back to a healthy status, they're not going to need Devontae Adams lining up, outside. They're just going to need a guy who can catch the ball and then do something with it.
My closing thoughts.
I don't know the statistic. I don't know the statistic, but I would venture to bet that their average depth of targets downfield is no more than like 10 yards per, their primary, it's no more than like 10 yards.
Watching 49ers is that when their offense is clicking, it's like, wow, look, they can do whatever they want. Whenever they run, they're getting 8-10 yards. It looks like, oh, look, they can throw George Kittle and they're tired of running. It looks amazing. But when things aren't going well, it's like, wow, they need a receiver. They need this. They're missing that. And it looks like this kind of depends because the way their offensive is so unique. Whenever you have a unique system like that, back when the Wildcat was introduced, when it has success, teams are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And when it doesn't, you're like, what the heck? What are they doing? Why are they doing that? Kind of like the Taysom Hill project in New Orleans.
And I do think the success of projects that unique are dependent on personnel. And when you got personnel, especially at a crucial position, moving in and out so frequently, I mean, it's hard to keep it up.
Yeah. Let's wrap up with Chicago Bears, New Orleans Saints. There's a lot of games when you're watching it, you're having a lot of fun. There's good plays on offense.
Oh my God, I hit Chicago.
There's good plays on defense. But then there's some games like this where you don't even want it to go to overtime. You don't even want the free football like we enjoyed last Sunday night with the Seahawks and the Cardinals. New Orleans does end up winning 26-23 in overtime. This was not entertaining at all. I hate watching Chicago play. Rishi and I had a conversation about this.
The only thing that anybody wanted to see in overtime was a Javon Wims versus Gardner Johnson lightweight boxing match.
I paid money for that.
Gloves, mouth guards, or not. And I think that's really the only thing that anybody wanted to watch in this game. I mean, the Saints. I just don't find the Chicago Bears entertaining.
The Saints should be pretty used to a wide receiver trying to throw punches at them in practice and stuff. So I think they were prepared for that moment when it transpired in the game.
Yeah, you would think, right? And perhaps that's why Gardner Johnson was so shook because he was like, man, that doesn't look like Michael Thomas, right? Like who is this guy? Like maybe I don't know. But the Saints, the whole game was unimpressive. It was just like two unimpressive teams putting on an unimpressive show that went to an unimpressive overtime and then resulted in an unimpressive result.
Yeah, this reminds me of kind of the Colts in the AFC. They tacked on another win for the Saints in this case, but I'm not impressed with the Saints. I hate watching them play, and Drew Brees used to be a guy that everyone would be like, oh, I can't wait to watch Drew Brees and what he does in this game. And now it's like, wow, Drew Brees, please get off my TV. It's funny how things like that change. I don't want it to happen with Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, but maybe their day's coming soon. But right now, that's Drew Brees.
Well, I will say one thing. It's possible that it could get a little better, at least watchable, when Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders comes back, because their weapons.
When?
Right. That's
when.
Sanders will be back next week for sure. He had COVID, so he had to miss 2 games. I don't know when Thomas is coming back, but I think the fact of the matter is, the fact of the matter is, the Saints somehow were still able to win this game with Kamara as their only real threat, and I think that speaks more to how bad Chicago was on offense. I mean, Nick Foles his ball placement was awful in this game. The offensive line wasn't able to block Cam Jordan, and the Saints defense has not been good in the past 2 years. And in today's game, they look like one of the better defenses, which says a lot of how bad Chicago is right now, especially on offense.
It was just an ugly game.
It was
just an ugly game. The funny thing is, it was an ugly game played by two teams that could be passed off as teams that are not so ugly based on record, but you put them in a situation where things matter, and that's how they're going to play, in my opinion. I'm not going to put any confidence in the Saints or the Chicago Bears to produce any results in crunch time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. I really have no other takeaways from this game. Just two teams that are the NFC's version of the Indianapolis Colts, both kind of slugfest, and it was only close because they're both match up in their mediocrity. Saints win. They're still alive in the NFC South, especially because they had that head-to-head win against Tampa. So they can get another one of those at the end of the season, then they might kind of steal that division away from a team that we all recognize to be better than them just because of those 2 head-to-head wins. So who knows how that
next week?
The second leg of that.
Next week they play Tampa.
And the other thing with that game is Antonio Brown appears in that game. Tampa does play tomorrow against the New York Football Giants.
We are excited to see that.
Are we all on board with the Buccaneers, or do any of y'all think that maybe the Giants can pull an upset off before we close the show?
Not a chance.
If the Giants pull off the upset, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers might as well quit football.
All right, well, that's Rishi's take.
I tend to agree.
All right.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree.
We're all in on Tampa, kind of like we were all in on the Packers, though, so maybe the Giants can make some noise. Who knows? That's going to be our show today. Any parting shots, Rishi, Shiv, before we close this one out?
I do have one comment. I'd just like to say, Eric Harris, if you're watching this, please quit football.
Yeah.
Please
Eric
leave
Harris,
the
we know
Las
you
Vegas
watch.
Raiders. You are the worst safety I've ever seen in my life.
We run the
and I wish nothing more than for you to stop playing football and never, ever play safety again for the Las Vegas Raiders. Thank you.
That's Rishi. Shiv, any party shot?
I've got one final comment. Hammer the line. We went 4-2 this week on our picks. We look to do better next time. We'll try to go 6-0, but 4-2, another winning week. We're doing something special over here, and that's about it.
And that's at Hammer the Line _now.
Yes, sir.
Hammer the line.
All right.
Also, Mike McCarthy, you suck. Give Zeke the rock.
Another shameless plug by Rishi and his fantasy team. Like I said, that's going to do it for Week 8 recap with the boys. This is Richard Patel with Early Action. Have a great week.
Early Action!